ORB Chapter 2 is about to start, but real quick, I just want to say hi. My name is Elijah. I'm a Christian author. I'm aimed to write fiction in every single genre, not just Christian fiction that avoids sin, but actively points to Jesus Christ. If you want to support me in my mission, please consider doing so by going to patreon.com/ElijahBuck, link in the description. Now on with ORB Chapter 2. Thanks.
ORB, a sci-fi story for kids.
Chapter 2. Terrifying Things from Above. When it was bedtime, Theo asked if the orb wanted to come meet Mama and Papa. The orb did not want to. In fact, it rolled underneath Theo's bed and hid. So, Theo went downstairs to say goodnight. He sat down on the couch in their living room next to Lydia, his baby sister. They both ate an evening snack while Papa read a chapter of the Bible to them. Theo had trouble paying attention to the story. It was Luke chapter 9 or 10, something like that. Finally, when Papa was done reading the chapter, Theo raised his hand to ask a question. "Yes, son?" said Papa. "Are aliens real?" Theo asked. Mama laughed, and Papa sat upright, looking a little uncomfortable. "Well, no, Theo, they're not," said Papa. "Well, how can we know?" asked Theo. "Because it's not in the Bible," said Mama. Theo sat for a minute. "But cars aren't in the Bible, and cars are real." "Well, good point, son," Papa began. "But people made cars. Just because an invention or Mama's brownies aren't specifically mentioned in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible is wrong about what it says." "Well, I don't think the Bible is wrong, Papa," said Theo. "But maybe just because the Bible doesn't talk about aliens doesn't mean they don't exist." Mama and Papa thought for a moment about Theo's point. "Well, aliens are not created by humans, right?" said Papa. "So, God would have mentioned aliens in Genesis. In 6 days, God made the heavens and the earth. It talks about the beginning of the universe, and nowhere does it talk about God making life on other planets." "Well, then why are there so many stories and shows about aliens?" asked Theo after a few moments of silence. "Well, son," Papa began, "people try to disprove God. People invented the theory of evolution to explain the universe without God. So, if aliens evolved on other planets, it would prove that the God of the Bible isn't real. That's at least what the evolutionists would say." Theo tried very hard to understand this, and wanted to keep discussing it with Papa, but he couldn't seem to put his thoughts together. "I suppose," said Papa, "the only way aliens could exist and not disprove God would be if they looked exactly like us. If they were 100% human. That would be impossible with evolution, which would mean God himself created these other planetary humans. But that would go against what the Apostle Paul wrote about Jesus' sacrifice." "I think, Papa," interrupted Mama, "a perfectly good answer is that the Bible leaves no room for the thought of aliens. God made space and other galaxies to display his glory." "Sure," said Papa, who looked like he had much more to talk and think about on the topic. "Time for bed now. I hope I answered your questions." "Yes, Papa and Mama. Thank you. I love you," said Theo as he hugged and kissed his parents goodnight. Theo brushed his teeth and went to his bed. On it, awaiting his return, sat an alien. A circular alien from another planet, and definitely not a human alien. The orb. The next day, Theo asked the orb if he wanted to meet Mama and Papa. The orb did not want to. "Well, then you'll have to stay in my room all day," said Theo. The orb didn't like this idea either. After breakfast, Theo asked Mama if he could spend his school day reading the Bible. "Oh, well, yes, of course," said Mama. "But at your desk, please." "Thanks, Mama," said Theo. He then went and got Papa's Bible. Theo didn't have a full Bible yet, just one with certain stories and devotionals. He wanted to study the real thing, even if the words were hard to understand. He pulled out the dictionary too, just in case. What was Theo's plan? He was going to read the entire Bible to see if it mentioned aliens. Page 1. Theo read through the first page and then the second page, reading about the creation week and the first humans and the first sin. No aliens. Suddenly, Theo felt a ball roll under his feet. He knew what it was right away. The orb. It had snuck out of his room, somehow snuck past Lydia, who was waddling all over the place, and then was right there below him, disguised as a soccer ball. "No," whispered Theo. "I have school to do. I won't be done until lunchtime." "What's that, sweetheart?" asked Mama from the kitchen. "What, Mama?" called Theo. "Did you say something to me?" "No, Mama." Theo looked back at the orb, but it was gone. He got a little nervous thinking about the floating ball with a personality going around his home secretly. If Mama discovered the orb, it would be better for him. Then she would see that it was more than just a soccer ball. He decided to keep reading. And then, just as he was nearing the end of the 4th chapter of Genesis, he thought about something he had read on page 2, chapter 3. He reread it, and then he sat straight in his chair. Theo was suddenly very excited. Where did the serpent come from? The one who tricked Eve into eating that fruit. Obviously, the serpent was the devil, so where did Satan come from? Theo had never thought of that before. He just knew Satan to be the bad guy of the Bible. "Mama!" yelled Theo. "What?" she called back, startled by his sudden outburst. "Who is Satan?" Mama walked into the homeschool room. Satan is a fallen angel, the enemy of God. He is known as the tempter, but his power over us was taken away at the cross of Christ. "A fallen angel used to be an in-heaven angel, right?" asked Theo. "Yes, son." "So when was he created?" Began Mama. But she couldn't think of an answer. "I don't know, actually. Maybe ask your father when he comes home. I would like to say he was made sometime in the creation week, but Genesis doesn't really say. Thanks for asking me that. We'll have to ask Papa together." With that, Mama left the room. Theo thought really hard about all of that. He thought to himself, if Genesis doesn't say when the angels were created, maybe it doesn't say when the aliens were created. Fascinated with his discovery, he kept reading. Chapter 4, Chapter 5, Chapter 6. Wait! What did he just read? In the first few verses of Chapter 6, something very strange was written. "Mama!" called Theo again. "Why don't you come here?" she replied. Theo stood up and walked into the kitchen. Mama was rolling out dough on the counter. Genesis chapter 6 talks about the sons of God having children with the daughters of men, and those children were giants. What's that all about? Would you like to clarify your question, Theo? Who are the sons of God, and why are their children giants and called mighty men? Theo asked quickly. Well, from what I understand, the sons of God are the fallen angels, demons. They saw the daughters of men, and it says they thought they were beautiful, so they married them. And then their children were powerful and evil because of that. So, half demon and humans? Yelled Theo. Yes, said Mama. But this was shortly before the flood, so they aren't around anymore. Okay, but where did they come from? Asked Theo. Who? Well, the fallen angels, said Theo. Well, they used to be in heaven, Mama began. Jesus said he saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. So they came down from heaven, like from the sky, and married women? Like actual human women? Asked Theo. Yes, I suppose so, if you put those two passages together, said Mama. Sounds like a sci-fi movie, said Theo. Like alien invaders coming down and making evil superhuman babies. Mama laughed. I guess it does, doesn't it? So maybe aliens are real, Theo said quietly. No, Theo. Fallen angels aren't aliens. They're fallen angels. I know your head is up in the stars, but the black sky with all its beautiful lights is supposed to direct our hearts to worship God, not seek for other life. Theo thought a lot about this and returned to his desk. He sat staring at the pages of the Bible and thinking about what Mama had said and what the Bible said. He decided to set aside those studies for the day until Papa got home. The subject was getting a little complicated for him. Mama came into the room again once she was done her baking. She reviewed his math book and taught him the history lesson of the day. Theo only had a few spelling sheets to fill out in English and French, and then he was free to go. He went upstairs to his room to see if the orb was still there. He almost wished it wasn't. He didn't even know what this thing was, after all, or where it was from. Except he knew it was from space. And that much was now a little concerning to him, if aliens didn't exist. Oh, the orb was in his room all right, but it had made some changes. First, his mattress was turned over and lying on the floor. Second, his books and toys were spread out all over the place. Third, his closet looked like it was ransacked by thieves. In short, Theo's room was the messiest it had ever been. Well, maybe not ever, but it was pretty bad. Theo sighed. And then he exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Ball!" The green orb hummed quickly, almost laughing. "Wait, are you even a mister?" Theo asked. The orb nodded. "Oh, good. A boy ball." "Where are you from?" Theo asked as he plunked down on the floor. "I know I asked you that yesterday, and I know you can only say yes and no. I just really wish we could talk, and you could tell me who you are and where you're from. No one seems to know what's going on." The orb let out a low wiring noise, and then it turned slightly blue again. He floated toward Theo and nestled into his lap. Theo instinctively began to pet the orb as if he were a cat. "Maybe I can teach you how to spell," said Theo. "If you learn to write, you could answer my questions." The orb floated up and spun around, turning white with excitement and glowing brightly. "You like that idea?" The orb nodded. He did like that idea. "Then it's settled. The big school has an outdoor volleyball court. We could practice writing in the sand." Theo stood up and grabbed his backpack. He opened it and emptied out all the toys that were inside. "Get in," he said. The orb turned from side to side, saying no. "No? Well, then you've got to go invisible, or become a soccer ball again. No other kid walks around with a floating ball following them." The pair left the house peacefully. Theo told Mama where he was headed, and she told him to make sure he was off the school property by the time the buzzer sounded. Theo agreed, and with that he was out the door. Theo walked down the sidewalk, while the orb floated slowly behind him, reflecting what was around so he looked invisible. After a few minutes, they reached the big school. The field was wide and empty. It had 2 soccer fields, one of which Theo was used to running around on, a big playground for the elementary kids, a baseball diamond, and finally, a sand volleyball court. Theo and the orb came to the court quickly, and Theo set out to teach the orb letters. Theo drew all the letters of the alphabet in the sand and instructed the orb to do the same. The orb was very good at copying the letters that Theo had drawn, only much bigger because the orb had to drag himself through the sand in order to write. Once the orb was done writing the alphabet, Theo figured he would teach him a few words. He remembered he started writing with easy ones when he was really young. He thought it was funny that the first word he aimed to teach the floating ball was ball. Theo wrote it out and then sounded it out. The orb drew it in the sand. "Hey!" a sudden voice yelled. Theo looked up and around and saw a girl waving at him from the front of the school. He looked down at the orb, which had turned clear. Theo stood and moved in front of his little friend from the sky. He looked at the girl and saw that it wasn't just any girl. It was Carly, the girl he had met the other night, the girl that had gone into the forest. He became very nervous, but still wondered if she had seen anything. After all, she might have been the first person at the orb's crash site. Theo waved back. Carly ran toward him, holding the straps of her backpack. "Theo, right?" "Yeah. Carly?" "Mm-hmm," she said. "Don't you have school?" he asked. Don't you have school? She asked. I homeschool, Theo said. He could feel the orb touching his back as he hid from Carly's sight. Even when clear and reflective, the orb was odd to see when close up. Oh, yelled Carly, I wish I was. My dad's picking me up early because he's taking me to an appointment. Was everything okay? Theo asked. He had a silly thought that if she did go into the forest, maybe the orb made her sick, and maybe he would get sick. Theo also started feeling bad that he was doubting the orb so much. So far, the orb had been nothing but nice to him. But he was from space, after all. None of your business, she said teasingly. Yes, everything's fine. I'm just going to see my mom is all. Theo had a curious mind, so he wanted to ask her where her mom was, but the question that burned in his mind more was of the forest. I wasn't sure where to find you, Theo began. I still want to know if you went into the forest. Ha! Sure did, said Carly. The trees were all burned up, and there was a crater the size of a car, but no satellite debris like your dad said there would be. And there weren't any meteorite pieces either. I think maybe the rock was soft and just fizzled out. That or I missed it. Either way, I bet the government people took any bit of it worth anything. Theo's eyes were wide. A crater the size of a car? He hadn't seen that. But he had gone in after the RCMP. Well, that means they had covered it up. But neither the police nor Carly had found what landed. Only Theo had. He wasn't sure he should tell her. What would she do with it if she did find out? Well, Carly said after seeing Theo wasn't replying, I should catch up with my dad. I guess I'll see you around. Carly started walking away. Just then, the orb bumped into the back of Theo's head. Ow! Theo whispered harshly. He quickly turned around and saw the orb, who had briefly turned green. Hey! Theo quickly reached up, grabbed the orb, and held him against his stomach. She might see you, he whispered. The orb floated upward, lifting Theo off the ground. Put me down! Theo yelled in a brief moment of panic. Carly looked back at the two of them. Whoa! She yelled loudly as she began running back. The orb quickly let Theo down and hid behind him. Hey, Theo said nervously. You were just floating! Carly shouted. Ha! Yes? How? Carly seemed to ask this as loud as she possibly could. Shush! You can't say anything to anyone, please, Theo said. What are you? Carly asked, poking his cheeks. Me? I'm a person, Theo swiped her hands away. Well, yeah, but most people don't float, silly, Carly replied. I'll tell you later, Theo suggested sheepishly. Oh, come on, that's not fair, Carly said. Well, you've got to go see your mom, right? Theo said. Carly's face seemed to drop a little. Yeah, okay, she said. Can you meet me here tomorrow after school? Maybe, Theo said. What about Friday? Carly asked. Still maybe. Theo, Friday after school. Be here. For the love of floating people, if you want me to be tight-lipped about this, you've got to tell me everything. Carly started to walk away, and then called out in a high-pitched and dramatic voice, Imagine the world finding out homeschoolers can fly! That is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, Theo called after her. Prove me wrong on Friday, she yelled. With that, Theo knelt down in the sand and said a quick prayer. Oh, Lord, please help me. The orb, too, sunk into the sand and hummed. They kept learning basic words until near when the school buzzer sounded. This meant the last class was dismissed. Theo ran off the field with the orb floating quickly behind him. When they came to the sidewalk that led to his house, Theo saw that Papa's car was already in the driveway, as well as his uncle's. Theo wondered if Silas, his cousin, was going to come over. That happened sometimes. Theo's uncle would come over after Papa was done work and wait for Silas to walk over from the big school. Theo would get to play with him for a while, but Silas was usually quiet after school and didn't want to play. Okay, Ball, he said as he looked at the orb. My Papa and Uncle are home. I'll have to go say hi to them right away. You should really get in my backpack so you don't get seen. Unless you want to introduce yourself like you did back there. The orb said no by turning from side to side again. He sunk to the ground as if he were pouting. Oh, come on. Remember the yellow thing? Afraid? Well, I'm afraid people will take you away from me if they find out, Theo said. And now Carly knows something's up. And you haven't even let me show you to Mama and Papa. If Uncle finds out, he's a pastor, so who knows what will happen. So get in. Silas might be coming too. He'll be here any minute. A thought came to Theo that maybe he should let the orb be found out. His stomach was suddenly in pain, and he felt bad for what he had said and thought. He didn't know it then, but he was feeling guilty. Guilty for keeping such a huge secret from his family. The orb slowly bobbed up and down, agreeing to Theo's backpack idea. Cool? Theo held out his fist. The orb floated forward and bumped against it. All right, now get in. Theo took off his backpack and unzipped it. The orb fit snugly inside, but Theo wasn't able to zip it closed. Okay, mister. Activate soccer ball mode, and I'll put you on the stairs. No one will think anything of it. Theo entered his home and did as he had said. He then went to the living room where Papa and his uncle were sitting. Hi, Papa. Hi, Uncle David. Hey, Theo, said Uncle David. How was the day, pal? Asked Papa. Pretty good, said Theo. But before Theo could say anything else, Mama came into the room. Actually, she started, Theo had some important questions today, even one I couldn't answer. Papa, we were going to ask you, but now that Pastor David is here, she smiled and looked at her husband and brother-in-law. What's the question, son? Asked Papa. Theo sat down. Well, I was reading Genesis today, and it doesn't mention when the angels were made, like Satan and the other angels and demons. Papa looked over at Uncle David with a smile. This one's yours, Pastor. Uncle David laughed. Great question, Theo. First, I'll say that the Bible doesn't specifically say when they were made, and this means it's not important for us to know. We don't need to know that answer in order to be saved by Jesus and to serve him with our lives. Second, the book of Job does say the stars, or the angels, rejoiced and sang when God created everything, which would be a reference to the creation week. This means the angels were more than likely made before our universe. Theo sat amazed. So if the Bible doesn't say when they were made, could it also not say a bunch of true things? Oh, well, hold on now, Theo, said Uncle David, leaning forward. Jesus says that he is the truth, and 1 Peter says we have everything we need for godliness. But this means there are no other truths out there and no other life-changing revelations to come. This means anything or any dot that would seek to disprove God is not truth, because he is truth. Like evolution? Asked Theo. Exactly, said Papa with excitement. But, continued Uncle David, you aren't wrong in that the Bible doesn't talk about everything. It just mentions what we need to know in order to know who Jesus is. So, aliens could exist. If it's not important, the Bible wouldn't mention it, asked Theo. We talked about that yesterday, said Papa. Aliens, shouted Uncle David. Now that's an interesting topic. Oh, brother, said Mama. What? It's in the Bible, said Uncle David. But most people think aliens are other physical beings living on different planets. But the Bible actually doesn't say they are. Tell us more, said Papa. Theo sat on the edge of the couch, staring at Uncle David and listening to every word. Genesis 6 talks about fallen angels coming down to earth making superhuman babies, interrupted Theo. Sure thing, began Uncle David. Beings that came from above. Sounds like aliens, doesn't it? But you're not saying they're aliens. They're fallen angels, said Mama. I'm saying those two things are the same, said Uncle David. He sat upright in his seat. Well, I think that might be a misleading way of saying things, said Mama. People might think you weren't talking about the same thing. Which is why you don't hear me talk about this from the pulpit. It's weird. Even I'll admit that. Thanks for the help, Uncle, said Theo. I'm going to clean my room before supper. He stood and left the room. Mama called after him. Silas will be here soon, too. Make sure you invite him to play when he gets here, okay? Yes, Mama, said Theo. However, to Theo's surprise, when he got to the stairs, his backpack was empty. The orb! Theo ran upstairs and threw open his door. Now he was terrified. If Uncle David was right, then Theo had spent that day with a very evil creature. He started to cry. But then the orb, colored blue, floated from underneath his bed and came up to his chest. Theo placed his hands on the sides of the orb. He felt soft, like a blanket or a stuffing. "You're not a bad angel, are you?" asked Theo. The orb shot backward and turned a slight shade of yellow. The orb hummed and turned from side to side. "But you know about them?" Theo asked. The orb nodded. "But you aren't one of them." The orb turned from side to side again. "Are you an angel then? Like a good one?" Theo asked. The orb turned from side to side again. Still no. "You're not any kind of angel." The orb buzzed sharply, and then he turned a slight shade of red to show he was annoyed by Theo asking the same question over and over. Theo sighed. He laid back on his bedroom floor and looked up at his ceiling. The orb floated above him and hummed. Theo felt so relieved. Somehow the orb understood him, and somehow he wasn't what Uncle David said he might be. He wasn't any kind of angel, good or bad. He was simply an alien, whatever that was.
You just listened to an excerpt from my new book, Orb, a sci-fi story for kids. The full book is available for purchase on Amazon, or you can listen to it all ad-free on patreon.com or on Spotify. Links are in the description.